This comes to you with huge thanks to our show sponsor, Resi. Resi is the UK's leading architectural platform, bringing together everything that you need to design, build and finance your dream project. Whether you're looking to extend, renovate or even build from scratch, book a free consultation at resi.co.uk. Welcome everybody, thank you for tuning in. This is season 4, episode 2 of the Move IQ Property Podcast, and I'm delighted to have you with me. Today we're going to be talking all about home improvements with or without planning permission, and I'm delighted to be joined by Nick Stockley, who is Chief Design Officer at our show sponsor, Resi. Nick, this is a really complex area, isn't it? It's quite unclear, and a lot of people get confused. Well, why don't we just kick things off with the difference between planning permission and permitted development rights and building regulations, because they seem to change quite frequently. Just give us the lowdown.
Hello there. Yeah, no problem at all. I think I'll touch on permitted development rights and planning policy first of all, and then building regulations is another whole kind of ball game, should we say. I think in short, permitted development is what the government allow you as a homeowner to do to your property without needing planning permission. Mm-hmm. So I think in short, that means, for example, how you can extend ground floor, 2 stories in some cases, how you could convert your loft, add a dormer, for example. Garage conversions sometimes fall into permitted development, basements as well, really? Facade changes, elevations. Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities to utilize permitted development rights, but it's all about the area, for example, you're located in.
The area you're located in, or the area the size of your house, because they don't apply to flats, do they? But
no, they don't. So area you're located in, if you own a dwelling, if you own a flat, then permitted development rights are removed from that. So yeah, you need to own the dwelling, a single dwelling, for example.
Okay. Am I right thinking it's also related to the original size of that dwelling? So if you bought a house and it's already had a kitchen extension, has that used up your rights of permitted development?
Yeah, sometimes it contributes to it. So, for example, if you've already extended a ground floor to the rear by X number of meters.
And that had happened 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's all about pre-1948. So this is where it gets very technical. I think it's actually July the 17th or something exactly, specifically. Yeah. But it's all about how they deem existing. So anything post-1948 is not classified as existing. So if it's been added to, that needs to be considered when you're extending further. And loft conversions, for example, you get a cubic volume allowance. So if you've already added a small dormer, what's left when you're adding more to it, for example?
And is it our rights of permitted development a kind of national thing? Is it that's, I was going to say that's straightforward. It's not straightforward at all.
No.
Or is it broken down into different areas, have different policies?
Yeah, it's national. It's across the UK. Right. But it gets quite technical when you look in different areas. So things like green belts, for example, you still have some permitted development rights, but with some specific councils or areas, they might have been removed. So it gets quite complex in terms of when you have or haven't got permitted development rights, and using someone like Resi or a local architect, they should have that knowledge and be able to explain to you what can you do.
I mean, they seem to have relaxed. I mean, there is a lot more that you can do nowadays than there was even 5 years ago, isn't it, under permitted development rights?
Yeah, I suppose a good example is the larger home extension scheme process, which is doubling your permitted development rights. So if you own a dwelling and you could usually extend, say, 3 meters, you can now extend up to 6. The larger home extension scheme is very heavily dictated by the neighbours. So if your neighbours are comfortable with it and do not object, as long as it's been designed in line with your rights, then you'll guarantee permission. If the neighbours object, then the council will then move that into determining it under planning policy, which could end up resulting in a refusal. But there are lots of changes. The government are really trying to help us extend our homes and create more space.
Which is great.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
For me.
Well, it's great for everybody, but actually it does bring complexities, and there are lots of sort of hoops to jump through. So actually having a company like Resi on board, or using professionals, is probably the way forward, just to understand what the current rules and guidelines are. Let's just move to so that's permitted development. Let's move to planning permission. So when do you require planning permission as opposed to permitted development rights, which are kind of available?
Yeah, I think it's property type, location as well, and also what you're looking to do. So as in how much you're looking to add to the actual property itself. So I think the key first step really is in my opinion, there's a lot of different ways of why a homeowner will extend. And I'm a strong believer of focus on the design dictating the space rather than permitted development or policy dictating what you do. Okay, there is speed, for example, in permitted development, but let the design dictate it, and a good, competent, experienced architect should then guide you through. If you do this is the application type you need. These are the pros and cons or the risks associated to it. So there's a hell of a lot around policy. But I think that the first step really is to understand your need as a homeowner and what you want to do, and then your architect should guide you through policy or application type, because it's not like one size fits all or black and white. It's quite intricate.
So what you're saying is don't be scared of needing planning permission if that's what the design leads you towards, because it is a process and you can get to planning permission. How would you say you could improve your chances of a successful application?
I think there's a kind of a bit of a deep dive that an architect should do anyway, and that's understanding local precedent. So whatever approvals have been granted over the last few years, for example, the context of the site, like the impact on the neighbours, that always needs to be considered. Talk to your neighbours as well, because if you can alleviate some of their concerns and they don't object, that puts you in a stronger position, in my opinion. They're the kind of things that I would kind of be looking into.
Okay. And what about reasons that planning actually gets refused? What would be? That's
policy driven there, really. I think that what you've basically got is each individual council will have a set of guidelines, residential design guidelines, and what's called supplementary planning guidance and documentation. Within those kind of documents, it will define what they would generally accept as a rule of thumb. So as long as you're designing with that in mind, or you're meeting that criteria, then your chance of success is 90% plus.
Okay.
If you want to kind of push the envelope and go beyond that, you need to then look to justify the design, but it carries risk. But you can get a better space.
Got it. It's exciting.
Yeah.
On the Move IQ website, we have my property reports, which you pay for and you can download. And actually within the property report, you get information on applications local to the specific house that you're interested in purchasing that have been both approved or declined. So you should, on that, my purpose behind that was actually giving somebody some really good indication of what is possible to do to this house and what isn't before they buy it.
Yep, makes sense.
What happens after you've got planning permission? And I was interested to hear you talk about completion certificates and things like that, and the paperwork to demonstrate that you've done it. And I've absolutely come across people who have done extension works. They've got the necessary stuff to get started, but actually they finished it and then brilliant and carried on living and not thought about any paperwork afterwards. And when it comes to sale, I haven't got it. So
every day.
What happens afterwards? What should people do?
I think from the start, apply for permission, even if it's under permitted development, seek what's called a lawful development certificate. That basically means the design is in line with your permitted development rights. It's important when you sell it. Sometimes, unfortunately, you can, disappoint a builder, think you know the legislation, build it, and then you're outside your permitted development rights, and you can get enforcement, for example, which is complicated, or lawyers will spot it when you come to sell, which delays the transaction or devalues the house, or you have to get indemnity insurance.
Yeah, I've come across that a number of times.
Yeah, unfortunately, it happens far too often because the government allow you to build without official permission under permitted development. So that's probably a different topic to talk about how we can control it. But my advice to homeowners is get your drawings done, seek permission, and get the paperwork in place there. Planning permission is a householder, or for planning permission, apply, get approval. And then the next key thing for me really is to think about building regulations. Again, you are allowed to build without a formal approval under what's called a building notice. But for me, get the drawings done, get your engineers involved, deal with party wall matters or drainage, build over applications, whatever it may be, your architect will be able to advise and guide you through it. Then you've got that level of information as well to then go to a builder or builders, 4 of them, for example, tender, get the costs in, analyze it, and then you can place a contract based on that information that's been produced. So you might think, yeah, I can do it quicker and I can do it cheaper. But in reality, you're exposing yourself to variations, not controlling the cost, problems on site, disputes. So that investment front end will really help you. And then at the end, you get your certificate of completion from building control to say, this complies with building regulations because they inspect it throughout the build.
That's just you were giving me a headache there, talking about all the problems and different people I had to deal with.
Well, I gave you a solution at the end.
Yes, the key thing there is you've got to have that bit of paperwork to tick the box after you've done the work that it satisfies all of what it should satisfy. And without that, when it comes to sell, you're going to be into some delays and problems.
Yeah, 100%.
It is a complicated procedure, of course it is, but you also adding value and adding space and enjoying your home more and able to stay there for longer and use it for different purposes. So of course it's complicated. And I think you're absolutely right. Because it's complicated and because the legislation changes quite often, it is worth getting the professionals in if you're looking at a serious job. Nick, super helpful as always. Lovely to talk to you.
No
Let's do it
problem at all.
again soon.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye for now.